When I did my first impressions of ReMonster the anime, I made the massive mistake of saying that it's a Walmart brand slimy sekai. To immediately have a bunch of people point out that yes, ReMonster was actually published before Reincarnated as a Slime. Additionally, yes, a lot of other isekais like Mushoku Tensei. But additionally, a lot of people were sending me DMs and comments saying, hey, just so you know, ReMonster inspired Mushoku Tensei. And that intrigued me. I immediately wanted to know more. I was trying to find the source. I was asking people, and I'm trying to find the source. I'm looking everywhere. I found there was a source in something that Rifujin had wrote from Mushoku Tensei series, but additionally, a lot of people pointed out a tweet that he made. But additionally, here recently, there was actually an interview that was done with not only Rifujin, but actually the author of ReMonster that actually shines a lot more light into exactly where that inspiration came from ReMonster. Additionally, how when he was writing Mushoku Tensei, readers actually inspired him to actually shift his focus for the Mushoku Tensei series. He also gets into his perspective on how he portrays good and evil and relationships, as well as how he sees characters as being realistic or not. There's a lot of really cool stuff here, but first I do want to point out what people were saying was the evidence that Rifujin was inspired by Mushoku Tensei, which I still want to get into because I think it does shine a little interesting light into his mindset around writing. This is a post made way back in April 2020. His original post quotes, "Light novels can be written by middle schoolers." He says, "Indeed, a wise saying. Novels can be written with the level of Japanese language proficiency of compulsory education. So it's easy. Easy. Everyone, let's write. Let's write now. Let's write casually. You might end up writing something boring, and it can be tough when you're serious about it. But it's usually fun. So let's write." He's trying to inspire people. As we'll get into in a minute, yes, it seems like he was inspired as well, so it's like he's kind of paying it forward. When somebody said, "What inspired you to write Mushoku Tensei?" there's a theory online that you wrote Mushoku Tensei as a prequel before writing your main works. Is that true? Rifujin says, and this is what most people, point to when they say that Mushoku Tensei as a novel was inspired by ReMonster. He says the trigger was when I found the work called ReMonster in a bookstore and read it. It was so interesting that I found out about the website, Shosetsuka ni Naru, and read various works. I thought, I could probably post my novel on this site without getting ridiculed. Again, this is why I think most people kind of misinterpreted this. He's saying that he read that and was inspired to put his stuff up there. And additionally, as he says after that, I decided on the title Isekai Tensei, Otherworld Reincarnation, because I thought it would be interesting to read. Since I wanted the protagonist to have a reason to reincarnate, I made him a scumbag. I also decided to use the world that I had already conceived as its setting. I remember that there was a character named Rudius in that concept, so I decided to use him. I didn't have any particular intention of making it a prequel. So right here, he's already saying that I already had concepts and whatnot kind of built for it, and that's when, again, he put that out there for the world to see. It's more that Rifujin himself was inspired when he's seen ReMonster and seen that it was posted on his website and said, I can post too. He was inspired to put his work out. Not that Mushoku Tensei as a story and concept was inspired by it. But, like I said earlier, this recent interview with both the creators on Comic Natalie does sort of imply there is some sort of inspiration here and there that you can draw from his comments. So without further ado, let's get into this interview on Comic Natalie. I absolutely found this interview really fascinating, and I do want to include the entire thing. It is a long interview, but I do want to include the entire thing because it is Rifujin and Kanekiru discussing a lot of decisions they make in writing, how they do a lot of their choices and what they do with their writing itself, and settings, inspiration, feedback, relationships, good and evil, all these cool things are all included in there. But I will have timestamps down below, but I do recommend kind of hearing out the whole thing so you get that context there. But that said, let's get into it. The article reads, "From the Shadows of Goblin's Hands, an interview with the creators of ReMonster and Mushoku Tensei." The interviewer says, first of all, what prompted you to start writing on Let's Become a Novelist? The author of ReMonster, Kogitsune Kanekiru, replied, it was around 2009 when I was in vocational school. At the time, I was attending a vocational school that was very far away. It took about 2 hours by train one way. I started reading Let's Become a Novelist during my commute, which Let's Become a Novelist is the website I mentioned earlier. This is the website where they're actually posting their novels online. It was the one that Rifujin actually used as well. And I was hooked on the Isekai no Mahoshi by Hiro Tenki. I started devouring other works as well, and before I knew it, I found myself wanting to write my own. That's when I posted my previous work to ReMonster, Recreator, the creator, and his heroine. The interviewer said, so that led to ReMonster. He said, yes, after writing Recreator, for about a year, I wanted to write a new work. That's when I came up with the theme of eating. I wanted to write a story where the protagonist gets stronger by eating something. but it's not appropriate to have a human eating a human in the story. So I thought of a monster and made the protagonist a goblin. I also personally like the look of ogres, so I thought if it was a beast similar to that, it would be a goblin. They go on to ask, there are many stories about non-human reincarnations into slimes, vending machines, and grimoires these days. But at the time, there weren't many examples of that, were there? He said, I don't remember that well, but I don't think there was that many as there is now. So rather than thinking about a template for an isekai story, there really wasn't a template at the time. I just wrote what I liked, and that's how I ended up writing about a goblin's reincarnation. Rifujin backed this up, saying back then, isekai stories weren't really the main genre in light novels. Even in 2012, when ReMonster was first published in book form, rom-coms and modern fantasy battles were popular, and isekai wasn't even a subgenre. In fact, not even that many fantasy stories were published. It was in that context that I found ReMonster and thought, that is it. So right here, we're already getting kind of a hint here that because of ReMonster, yeah, he was sort of giving a hint as to what he wanted to fall into. But again, he did imply earlier that he did have these concepts of this other world that he wanted to work with. But it could be the concept of doing an isekai may have been an inspiration there. The idea that yes, I had this concept of this other world. I was going to do a fantasy world, but now I see this kind of works really cool. So yeah, maybe I might have this character that I've already created be an isekai that's a scumbag. Kanekiru said, it's true. There weren't many isekai stories being published back then. So when I got an offer to publish my book, I thought it was a scam at first. I had offers from Alpha Polis and another company, but I was half-hearted about it, wondering if it was okay to accept. And again, this is the cool idea to kind of think about here, because I think that was the argument that a lot of people made when Mushoku Tensei was first coming out, was like, holy crap, another isekai, another isekai. And everybody was arguing at the time, no, this is the godfather of isekai. This is the guy that started it all. Now, yes, I argued, like most other people, that no, there's a lot of things about Mushoku Tensei that has been done before. The idea, though, was that Mushoku Tensei itself made it popular. It popularized a lot of concepts there. And as they're pointing out here, isekai itself at that time wasn't a popular genre, which, yes, I echo. Like they said, yeah, there's rom-coms and everything. During that 2000 to 2010 era, it was just nothing but rom-coms and whatnot. The interview goes on to ask Rifujin what prompted him to start publishing on that platform. I started writing there in 2012, and it all started when I picked up ReMonster at a bookstore. I learned about Let's Become a Novelist from the colophon of ReMonster, which said that the work was posted on that site. From there, I read the sequels of ReMonster that weren't published in book form yet, and I read all sorts of other works. And as a result, Mushoku Tensei was born. So if it weren't for ReMonster, I wouldn't be here today. I can't thank Kanekiru enough. Kanekiru replies, oh no, not at all. But I'm very grateful to hear you say that. He said, in fact, before that, I tried to become a light novel writer once by applying for a New Writers Award, but I gave up around 2009. I thought I would never write again. But then I was inspired by ReMonster. So it's really thanks to ReMonster that Mushoku Tensei exists. Key thing there. And again, I think that is absolutely fantastic. What they're basically saying here is, I think he was saying that he was writing way back when he was in school. And at some point, he gave up. Like he says, 2009, I kept writing stuff. I thought about applying for this thing. But then at some point, he's like, no. He just gave up. But then he read ReMonster, the published form. He read it and said, oh man, this is kind of cool. Oh, it's actually here. He goes there. He goes to that website. He sees all the other works there. He reads more that's not published yet in physical format. And then at some point, he says, I can do this too. Again, it inspired him to go, I can put my stuff out there and not be ridiculed. And that's what the inspiration was. He was inspired to actually put his works out there, which I think is a fantastic thing because, like he even says here, he thought about applying for something. And I think if he ended up winning that, he probably would have gone into an actual publisher. And there's a possibility that his works itself would be more sanitized, something that is for a more general public. Now, granted, again, in Japan, a lot of things are more accepted in Japan to be in there. Like they'll mention later on, ReMonster is pretty gory. But there may have been some sort of restriction there. But because he found this website, he was able to put whatever he wanted on there. And that's what is so great about Mushoku Tensei is it doesn't hold anything back. And I think that was probably because of the fact that he was able to put it there and not have to worry about an editor saying, no, you can't do this. No, the public might not like that. He had no editor to tell him what to do. That's why Mushoku is so great, is because he had no filters. He had no editor to tell him don't do something. Now, granted, now that it was going into light novel format, things could have been cut. A lot of things changed. And that's probably due to the fact that it went to an editor to publish at that point. But the original story, this was raw Rifujin, basically. The interviewer goes on to say, so because of ReMonster, there's Mushoku Tensei. And because of Mushoku Tensei, there are the popular works on Let's Become a Novelist today. Yeah, it's like inspiring, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And again, like he's with his whole tweet that he made that I talked about earlier, get out there and write. Like he just wants people to do the same thing he did. Don't give up. Please write. It's so inspiring. I love it. Rifujin says, exactly. I think that Mr. Kanekiru and the others lay the foundation, and we added to it to create the current popularity of isekai works. I really think that if it hadn't been for Mr. Kanekiru, Mr. Yanai Takumi of Gate, Mr. Sajima, Tsuyoshi of Irregular Magic High School, and others, I wouldn't have been able to get my works published. And the isekai boom of Let's Become a Novelist wouldn't have ever happened in the first place. Again, I think that's a really great thing, to acknowledge everybody that has sort of built it to what it is. Again, it doesn't diminish what each one does. It doesn't mean that because they did this, you're not allowed to do this. Everything inspires something else. And that's what I've always said, especially with the isekai boom. It's always this idea of it's not so much, oh, another isekai, which yes, I can't help but have that in my mind now and then. But it's more of a, what will they do different? And yes, I will admit, if I go into it and I don't feel like it's doing anything different, I will feel like it's just a copy paste. I will admit that, hey, this person wasn't really trying something. This person was just trying to hit on the hype. And yes, they might have a concept in there that was their idea of making it fresh. But sometimes it doesn't stand out enough to make it worth it. But it's still allowed to be there, and I think that's where a lot of these really great pieces come from. It's in somebody inspiring somebody to inspire somebody. And that's really how a lot of these people will work. That they read somebody's work and they go, you know what? This is great, but I think it'd be better if this. And that's how a lot of this stuff is created. The interviewer says, when you started writing ReMonster, how much did you have in mind for the story after that? Kanekiru says, since it's a diary-style novel written from Goboru's first-person perspective, I was trying to write a story for 365 days. After that, I didn't have any plans. And I was just thinking that it would be okay if I serialized it for a year and then it ended. But it's still going on, laughs. I've been writing it with the same feeling for over 10 years now. So to be honest, I still don't have any self-awareness as a writer. Rifujin says, I understand. It's been a continuous story since you started writing it on Let's Become a Novelist. And I'm not sure if I'm a writer myself, since I've been writing one on the web all along. Kanekiru says, I'm just writing what I like on the web. That's an interesting thing there, because that idea of maybe possibly not being seen as an author because you post it there. It's like, I don't know, a good example would be if you're a YouTube creator, like if you're creating content on YouTube, are you the same level as somebody that's on national television? Because there's some people that will make stuff on YouTube that is literally of better quality than what you get on actual national television. But many people will see them as less. And I wonder if that's that mindset there. Am I really an author? Am I really with that designation? Or am I seen as somebody that's just blogging? The interviewer says, you mentioned that you started writing Mushoku Tensei after reading Let's Become a Novelist submissions like ReMonster. But what was it about ReMonster that made you want to write that much? Rifujin said, the original novel of ReMonster doesn't have much dialogue. In a typical novel, you would balance the character interactions and the narrative to move the story forward. But ReMonster is basically in Goboru's first person. And Goboru is a somewhat enlightened reincarnated person, so he half recognizes the other characters as symbols. But then, as the story progresses, the way the other characters are portrayed changes. As I got to see bits and pieces of their feelings, my own perspective changed as well. Somehow, I started to think of Gobokuchi as a really reliable guy, and I started to feel affection for Gobomi-chan and the red-headed short girl. There was moments when I thought, could this character be like this? And that felt strangely real to me. That's a really cool point that he has in here, and I think this is one of the things that really did kind of catch my interest in this interview, is this idea that Rifujin, in reading ReMonster, realized the characters were not what they were. And it gets into more here in a minute. As the interviewer says, so, you mean that the way the characters are portrayed is realistic? He said, in novels, you tend to try to make the characters convincing from the start. Like, this is my best character. But in reality, you don't have a strong impression of someone at first sight. But you gradually get to know them and think, are they like this? That was fresh, and I was drawn to it. Now, this is the thing that I kind of wonder how, it's kind of one of those annoying things about some of these interviews in Japanese. It's like they don't really press. And this is one of those moments where I'm like, I would press on him. So is that maybe something that really did inspire him with Mushoku Tensei, with Rudius, to make him a lot more unsettling at first? Because again, he has talked about how he had this concept with Rudius and whatnot, But he said additionally that he made him a scumbag. And is that the idea here? Because I really do think that's what Rifujin does nail with Rudius, is that he is a character that is unsettling at first. He's not a character that, like he said, this is my best character, he's a good person, whatever. No, in reality, he's kind of building him up. And I think he also may be applying that to side characters as well. Side characters that you don't really have an idea of, and then over time, you start to wonder, is this how they really are? But either way, this does put it in perspective that in Rifujin's mindset here, he is pretty much establishing this is an idea that I like. An idea where when the characters come out, and they're not exactly what you think they are, and there's so much more behind them. You don't have a strong impression of them from the first sight. You gradually get to know them. The interviewer then asked Kanekiru, do you consciously try to write that way? I wrote my previous work, Recreator, in a normal way, but I started to feel like it was a pain to write in first person plus dialogue format clearly. So I thought that if I wrote it in a diary format, I wouldn't have to write the character's dialogue. And since I didn't have the character setting decided from the beginning, I started writing by taking the form of the diary that Goboru was writing. Then somehow the characters started to move on their own, and I ended up with this format. I think that if I had been seriously aiming to become a writer, I wouldn't have written that way. This is super cool. I think this and what Rifujin said is kind of super cool. And the idea of sort of thinking that if I was going for it's similar to earlier, again, going for that award and become an actual novelist and, having a publisher and an editor and everything like that. There is a side of here where it's like they often say, this is what I wanted to write. He's especially saying here, this is what I wanted to write. It's not that like, okay, yeah, if I did become, an actual author, I probably wouldn't have done that. But let's face it, ReMonster, for those that love it, I have my issues with the anime, I have not read the novel, but for those that love it, they probably like that idea. Just do what you want to do. Don't go with the usual. Don't go with what the publishers want. Don't go with what's popular. Just go with what you want to make. And it might actually turn into something that is incredibly cool that a lot of people want because it has that freshness. Interviewer says, on the other hand, I heard that you are reading Mushoku Tensei from the beginning of its publication. I think it was around the time the 10th episode was updated. I'm assuming that's probably 10th chapter, ? I've been reading all the way through to the Snakefoot arc. The psychological portrayal was amazing, and I thought it was wonderful that he portrayed Rudius' life from the beginning to end. Rifujin cut in saying, I wrote the psychological portrayal in a way that would draw mixed reactions. In stories, humans tend to be neatly divided into good and evil, but I don't think that's always the case with human relationships. But, like Kanekiru, I was just writing what I liked calmly, so I might not have written it that way if I had been thinking of becoming a writer. Again, I think that's what makes it fantastic. It's like, it almost makes you wonder, like, if somebody could step into that conversation and say, hey, but that's why it's great. That's why it's great. Again, you don't have the usual molds. You did what you wanted to do. And yeah, I haven't actually read the web novel. I'm going to read that after I finish the light novel. But I've heard here and there that there's a little bit of clumsiness to it. And that makes sense. An aspiring writer just posting something on this website is probably going to have some messiness to it. It's not going to be probably formatted to a professional that you would deem a professional, like an actual, like, published and edited article or whatever, or a book. But that's what makes it, like, raw and unfiltered. But again, right here, he is hitting on that idea of that psychological portrayal and how he makes his characters. They're so easily divided between good and evil. He wanted to do something different. He just wanted to do what he wanted to do. The interviewer says, by the way, both of you don't have a sense of self as writers, and you're just writing what you like. But have you ever felt a sense of accomplishment as a writer? Kanekiru says, not really. I'm not a professional writer. So my life revolves around something else. I just kept writing what I like, and somehow I've made it to an anime adaptation. So I guess I'll never feel this sense of accomplishment again. That's kind of a sad thing to say. It's never going to happen again. Somehow I made it here. I have an anime. That's crazy. Rifujin replies, it's a little different from a sense of accomplishment. But when I'm told by junior writers that they like Mushoku Tensei, or they started posting on Let's Become a Novelist after reading my work, it makes me feel like I've tightened up my act. That's gotta feel really good. Again, that's another thing that I see a lot when I look at a lot of stuff that Rifujin is posting on Twitter or X, is a lot of people saying, hey, I got inspired by you. Thank you for posting. Thank you for saying this. Like with that whole post earlier that was saying, please write, please write, please write. It's a lot of people saying, I'm doing that. Thank you so much kind of stuff. It's super cool. Again, inspiring. He got inspired to put his stuff out there, and now he's inspiring other people. Put your stuff out there. The interviewer says that's exactly what you said to Kanekiru earlier. Kanekiru laughed. Rifujin says it makes me feel like I have to be more conscious of my behavior as a writer from now on. But just because someone tells me that, it doesn't mean that my skills are going to change. That's the tough part. That's kind of goofy. Again, that's that aspect. Like, now he's a senpai basically, and he's like, crap. Now I gotta shape up. I gotta look good. But he does it. He does it. I love it. That's what I've always loved about, especially with the anime adaptation happening. Constantly, he's posting like just troll. I don't care what people think about my stuff. This is what I wrote. This is why I wrote it. Take it or leave it. Interview says now, 13 years after its publication, the anime adaptation of ReMonster is currently airing. Mr. Kanekiru, how did you feel when you first heard that it was going to be adapted into an anime? This is where things kind of get sad. And it's like one of those moments like, I think somebody is keeping their mouth shut. Let's be honest. Not a very good adaptation, or at least not... Again, I haven't read the source material, but visually and what I'm seeing presented doesn't seem like it works. Which is odd because they technically get into what seems to be the reason for that. But unfortunately, again, not really saying anything. Kanekiru says, to be honest, I was worried about whether it would be acceptable in terms of expression. I wondered if it could be broadcast on television. I was worried because I thought that the half-gory depiction was the reason why there hadn't been any plans to adapt the anime in the past. Rifujin has to speak up. Rifujin has to speak up. Hey man, I got some experience with that. Let me tell you, boy. Here, I am the senpai. Rifujin says, since various popular works have been adapted into anime, fans can't help but think that the reason ReMonster hadn't been adapted into an anime is probably because of gory depiction. But I thought that if Mushoku Tensei was okay, then it might happen someday. Hey, if mine can get adapted, yours can get adapted. But again, it's totally different things there. Like the Kanekiru says, well, Mushoku Tensei is not exactly gory, so there's no problem. Yeah, it's a different reason. Yes, ReMonster, he was worried because, yes, it's gory. But with Mushoku Tensei, it's the questionable stuff. It's the, how Rudius was originally. People aren't going to like the guy. Or they're going to relate to him. That's what I've always loved about Mushoku Tensei. You're either going to hate the guy, or you're going to relate to him, or you're going to understand him. And that's the important thing. That's what I get from it. I understand him, and I think it's fascinating to see somebody in a terrible state slowly change. The interviewer says, indeed, if you avoid that aspect, you'll lose the essence of ReMonster. That said, did you give any orders to the anime staff? Now here's the problem. Here's where he messed up. Kanekiru says, I don't think I gave them many orders, because the drawings they had provided were so amazing. Yeah, probably episode 1 drawings. When I was writing the original novel, I didn't have much of an image of the voices or the movements either. As a result, they turned it into something wonderful. Did you watch past episode 1? Did you watch past episode 2 at least? And I once again felt like they were all professionals. They're professionals. The animators are they're professionals, obviously, but I think they lack either a schedule, a budget, or something. And technically, I think that was the studio that was doing 3 shows this season. Again, when they did each one of them, was it all done at the same time? Did they have enough staffers? What happened? However, I did tell them, please do this scene this way for my favorite scene. What scene is that? It's a cover illustration for volume 3 of the novel, where a severed head was placed behind Gaburo. I actually looked into it. I was like, okay, wait, is this that? Why is that not allowed? It's not that bad. It's a monster. I thought it was gonna be a person's head. It's not good to have it too gory, but this is a scene that couldn't be left out. So I asked them to do it, even though it was a lot to ask. Yeah, if you're talking about this thing being gory and that's gonna be a problem, I don't know, maybe severed head's a thing in Japan. I'm not really sure. I've seen plenty of severed heads in anime. Mr. Magonote or Rifujin, what is your impressions on the anime ReMonster? Rifujin says, as I mentioned earlier, the original novel is a work without any dialogue. So I think the staff had a lot of freedoms in terms of interpretation. It was interesting to see them reconstruct it in a direction similar to a comic book version. As a fan, it was also heartwarming to see the dialogue and interactions that were not depicted in the original story. Yeah, that's an oddity there. I think what they're pretty much implying here is because it's wrote like a diary, he's basically saying what happens each day. It's not so much that he's writing and then blah blah said something and then blah blah said something. So my assumption there, based on how they're saying this, is that it's literally just the events of the day. Which, like I said earlier, technically makes sense to when I got to the point where I've pretty much have dropped it. I got to like, I don't know, 5 or 6 or something like that, 7 maybe, and I dropped it. because what it turned into was literally day blah, and then it cuts to basically him narrating over what happened that day. Day blah, this happened this day. Day blah, this happened this day. Which doesn't really work so well in an animated format because anime is visual, it's audio. Whereas, yes, I can see it working in a text format. So it is odd they're basically pulling out here. Yeah, they added some stuff to it. Which, from Rifujin's perspective, whether you like the novel or not, or the anime or not, he's saying he likes that idea of adding a little bit more to it. They're adding the interactions, they're adding the dialogue that he seems to like. Kanekiru says, as the original author, I was surprised and thought, this is how that scene went. There were original elements in the manga adaptation as well, but I'm looking forward to enjoying the staff's interpretation in the anime as well. Maybe that's where they kind of pulled it from. I don't know. He's saying that it's anime original, so I'm assuming that it's not from the manga version of it. The interviewer says the original work will continue, but do you think having voices and movement put into the anime will change your writing in any way? Kanekiru says it might not change that much. The latest development is that he's acting alone. The other characters will come back in a bit, but I won't know until I write it. I'm assuming in the story he's separated himself. Rifujin says, after all, the anime is the anime, and the original novel is the original novel. I like that mindset. I personally have a problem with that in a lot of cases. Like, even me, I criticize a lot with the anime adaptation of Mushoku Tensei. But I do, at the end of the day, I'm not that worked up about it. I will still be able to step back and go, the novel's still there. It doesn't take away from the novels. I have been thoroughly loving the novel series Mushoku Tensei. And just because, yeah, they skip a chapter or something like that, they skip a character's perspective, it's like, it's more of an aspect of me going, damn it, I wish that the anime onlys could have experienced that. It's not so much that I care about the anime adaptation. Yeah, I would love a perfect adaptation, but it's never going to happen, unfortunately. But there is a side of it that I'm like, yeah, like here recently, man, I would have loved him have the scene with Elise and the Warriors of the Desert when she stepped up to that lady. I wanted to see that animated and her voiced by the Seiyu. That would have been so cool. You willful child. Do you want to fight? Let's fight. It's so great. Anyways, the interviewer says it's a strange coincidence that the second season of the TV anime Mushoku Tensei is also airing the same time as ReMonster. This one is also heading towards the end of the story, and it's unfolding in a hard-boiled way. Rifujin says, originally, I was planning to make Mushoku Tensei a little more casual, but as I wrote the protagonist's motivations, I got a lot of feedback from the readers saying they wanted to read more. So I suddenly switched gears. If it hadn't been for that turning point, there may not have been a scene where he marries Sylviette. There may have been a possibility that he would break up with Edis and hooked up with another girl. I see. That's better for now. Right, and as for the future of the second season of the TV anime, the psychological portrayal that Kanekiru mentioned earlier will be the main focus, and some shocking developments will be depicted soon. Please pay attention to the changes in the relationship between the characters as well, and I hope that you'll watch it until the very end. That's definitely true. That is definitely true. But yeah, I do kind of find it interesting here that he's mentioning the fact that he was pretty much he was thinking of making it more casual, but then when he was talking about the motivations and whatnot, he got feedback from people, and so he decided to switch gears. Like, I guess his focus on where he was going with it sort of shifted a little bit based on the feedback people were giving. Like, they wanted to see more of this. And I think that's what's really implying there. I was doing this, and I was being more casual, and then suddenly people were, I guess, gravitating to certain aspects that he was doing, and he said, okay, if that's what you guys like, let me get into that more. Let me expand on this more. And it seems like that actually turned into something really great. On the occasion of this interview, there are bound to be people who watch the anime version of ReMonster from episode 1. So I would like to ask both of you what you would like them to pay attention to in order to enjoy ReMonster more. Rifujin says, I think the most important thing is to watch it with the knowledge that the work was one of the first to be published on Let's Become a Novelist. Of course, Mushoku Tensei, but also That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, which is also about reincarnating into a monster, were both posted after ReMonster. I'm sorry, Rifujin, it was a title to get people's attention. You have to be a little bit enticing to get people to watch your YouTube video sometime. It's criticizing me personally. So I think that you'll enjoy it more if you think about what kind of works were there in the early days of isekai works, which have continued to this day. Yeah, he makes a good point, though. It's like you can't really say, oh, it's just another reincarnated as a slime, because it was before it. Kanekiru says, it's a little difficult to talk about my own work, but if I had to pick up one point of interest, it would be the meal scenes, obviously. I think the anime's way of expressing how delicious things are when Goboru eats them is unique. I hope that you'll pay attention to that and become interested. Yeah, it seems like the animators are doing plenty of work on the eating animations, not much else, but I hope that you'll pay attention to that and become interested, and that you'll check out the original novel. I would be happy if you would read up to volume 3, and if you find it interesting, please pick up the latest volume as well. Rifujin cut in saying, so, we're having this interview. I'd like to ask you what re in ReMonster means. Kanekiru says, when you reply to an email, you put re, don't you? I read reply as transformation and put re in front of it. It means transform into a monster. Also, in French, re means king, but that's an unintended coincidence. I see established that. Finally, the interviewer says, I see. Also, as a reader, I'm curious about the new works the two of you will be writing in the future. Rifujin says, I'm going to be busy on the Orc's Hero Chronicle of Flattery until it's finished. What about you, Kanekiru? Kanekiru says, I'm also going to be busy with ReMonster until it's finished. I still have a few ideas though. I like to write something about modern dungeons. How would you handle the disposal of monster materials in a dungeon? How would you think about the law? Rifujin says, I love to read that. Please write it. Kanekiru says, I'll do my best. It seems like these guys are cool with each other. I like that. It's like a lot of people point out the fact that ReZero's creator and Rifujin are like super buddies and whatnot. They talk a lot. And yes, technically Faraway Paladin, dude just loves Mushoku Tensei. I love how these writers all kind of support each other, which is kind of funny in the wake of the fact that so many people get so like tribal about which one's better. Oh my gosh, ReZero's so much better than Mushoku Tensei. No, Mushoku Tensei's so much better than ReZero. These dudes are just cool with each other. They're like, yeah, cool, dude. I like his work. He inspired me in this thing. I got this idea from him. I like this aspect of his. It might be what applied to here. It's this cool idea where they inspire each other to keep pushing forward and writing things that people love. No matter who started it, no matter who came first, no matter who does what thing better, they all inspired each other, which is great. But yeah, cool stuff. I really like this interview. Like I said, I like getting a little bit more insight into how ReMonster basically pushed Rifujin to say, basically take that leap of faith. I'm going to try it. I was going to give up. I read this thing. I thought, you know what? I can put this out here. I can try this out. And it came to what we got. And so no matter if you don't like ReMonster or you like ReMonster, no matter what it is, it still technically is what pushed him to do that. I think that's fantastic. And again, I like a lot of this aspect in here talking about the fact that they were trying to do one thing, but then they decided to do this platform. And again, like I said earlier, I really do feel like that's really implying this idea that they were able to do something different because they weren't held down. Because they weren't held down by an editor or somebody to tell them, nah, you should probably not do that. They did what they wanted to do. And that's how it came to what it came to. So really cool stuff. Like I said, love this interview. Hope you guys enjoyed this run through of it. If you did, make sure that like button down below, comment. Let me know what's the most fascinating thing in this for you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Additionally, if you like this content and you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips, links, so thanks, membership button below. Greatly appreciate what it does. And y'all take care.